Ladies and gentlemen, this is 100 Beast Kenchi bringing you a One Piece discussion titled Conquerors Haki. The reasoning for this video is the developments of Conquerors Haki that have taken place in the fight between Monkey D. Luffy and Kaido have helped to shed some new light on Conquerors Haki as a system within the story itself. So today I want to break down a few things and also throw a little theory in there in terms of the highest levels of Conquerors Haki, or the ceiling. Where does the ceiling of Conquerors Haki go? So during the time that the Conquerors Haki situation arose, I did hear a little bit of talk from people about how it was a kind of an ass pull from Oda. But if you go back to chapter 1, the very first chapter of the story of One Piece, Shanks is the first person in the entire story to use Conquerors Haki. What he does is he uses the intimidation aspect against the Sea King that takes his arm. Now, you could argue that at that point, Conquerors Haki, or the Haki system, wasn't fleshed out to the degree that it is right now. Maybe Oda didn't have everything figured out just yet. When you go back though and you look at that situation, knowing what you know about Conquerors Haki right now, you can see that there's not very much difference to what was happening with Shanks in that very first instance, as opposed to what's happening now in terms of intimidation. And Shanks is actually a key individual when it comes to Conquerors Haki, or when it comes to Haki in general, because Shanks is also the first individual to actually split the sky along with Whitebeard in that first encounter on the ship, when he goes to speak to Whitebeard about allowing him and the red hair pirates to go and capture Blackbeard instead of him going after him himself because, you know, he's getting dangerous, etc. And that in itself is a whole other discussion, because what does Shanks know about Blackbeard that would make him go to Whitebeard and say, look, I feel like you might need my help, but not in so many words, because Shanks knows some serious things. The only person we know, the only pirate captain we know to just casually walk up to Marijoa, I guess in a hood, but to just go and casually have a conversation with the Gorosei, like, yo, something's going on out at sea, you know. I need to tell you, man, about this. But again, that whole Shanks thing, that's a whole thing in itself, and we will come to that when we come to it. So when it comes to splitting the sky with Conquerors Haki, like the way that Shanks and Whitebeard did in that first instance, the only people we have seen to split the sky are the Yonko. 1046 chapters in, the only people who have split the sky upon clashing are the Yonko and the Pirate King Goldie Roger. If we remember, if we go back to Marineford, where Akainu clashed with Whitebeard in that epic Devil Fruit vs Devil Fruit, Haki vs Haki clash, the sky did not split. Now the question is, for that instance, is it because Akainu himself does not have Conquerors Haki, so the sky splitting thing just simply won't happen even if Whitebeard is capable of it himself? Or Whitebeard is too old and too sick to muster the stamina that he needs to actually throw a Conqueror's Haki punch, because everything to do with the highest level, Devil Fruit Awakening, Conqueror's Haki coating, it seems to, I would imagine it takes a higher amount of stamina to do, so perhaps Whitebeard wasn't capable during Marineford, which is potentially why the sky didn't split when he clashed with Akainu. The next clash we see after this, I believe, is Goldie Roger versus Whitebeard in the Wano Country Oden flashback, which is crazy because that's hundreds of chapters later. And that clash between Whitebeard and Roger was the greatest clash in history so far. It was well beyond the clash between Whitebeard and Shanks anyway. The next clash that we see is between Kaido and Big Mom when they finally meet in Wano Country, and they have their little skirmish at the beginning. They have a Conquerors Haki clash as well, but this Conquerors Haki clash bears more similarity to the clash between Whitebeard and Shanks than it does Whitebeard and Roger in the past. Meaning Roger and Whitebeard still to this day have displayed the strongest Conquerors Haki clash so far in the story. The last time that we saw a Conquerors Haki clash was between Monkey D. Luffy and Kaido at the beginning of the one-on-one between Kaido and Luffy during Roof Peace. Now that clash between Monkey D and Kaido, it had a little bit of a caveat because down below, the Mink, Dogstorm, King of the Day, Inuarashi, was fighting with Jack the Drought, and the clouds had come overhead, which ended up blocking his Sulong form. When the clash happened between Luffy and Kaido, it completely cleared the clouds from the skies above Onigashima, which bears more resemblance to the clash between Whitebeard and Roger than it does Whitebeard and Shanks. However, the caveat of clearing the entire sky above Wano, that may just be a story beat to enable Oda to bring Inuarashi back into Sulong form and keep everything cohesive. Now, I think the importance of mentioning all of these clashes is to say that only the strongest individuals on the sea, only the Yonko, are capable of splitting the sky with a Conqueror Haki clash. However, I do believe that the sky split comes with the mastery of Conqueror's Haki coating, as opposed to just Armament Haki coating with Conqueror's Haki just in your soul. Because in Whole Cake Island, Luffy and Katakuri had a Conqueror's Haki clash, and while they were inside and they didn't clash with punches, they clashed with pure Conqueror's Haki. We don't know if that would have split the sky. It did, however, cause massive amounts of destruction in the mirror world. So I would say that this was the beginning of Luffy's mastery of Conqueror's Haki, where he's able to affect the surroundings, just like Shanks, because Shanks' portrayal seems to indicate that he is a master of all forms of Haki. None have mentioned any Devil Fruit ability from any of the red hair pirates. In the very first episode, he was shown to be swimming when he saved Luffy from the Sea King. And I'm sure he can still swim, even with one arm. He's just that type of guy. Shankso. Does he have a surname? Or is he just like Cher? Either way, they are feared by everyone. Everyone at Marineford was afraid of the red hair pirates. That was a battlefield full of Devil Fruit users. Logia, Zoan, Paramecia, whatever it may be, all types. And they all were afraid of Shanks. The only thing that a Logia Devil Fruit user need fear is Haki. And that's if their Haki is not up to par. So if you're an individual who has Haki and a Devil Fruit, but you don't have Conqueror's Haki, you should probably fear the guy who has Conqueror's Haki. Or be wary. Be wary. Now, when talking about Haki in general, we need to understand that there are levels to each form of Haki. Observation Haki, it begins with the user being able to sense the presence of other individuals. So while precognition effectively becomes the standard for Observation Haki user, actually being able to see the future, like someone like Katakuri being able to see the actual future and see what people are going to say and do and where they're going to move to. That is the next level above the initial ability of being able to sense the presence of other individuals. When it comes to armament, Rayleigh demonstrated a high level of armament. Rayleigh probably demonstrated Conqueror's Haki coating, because when he did the armament move, there was no darkening of the limb, which again, it could potentially be because Oda hadn't figured out how Haki was going to work visually yet. There was no Haki hardening. Instead, he formed the armor around himself, just like the Conquerors do when they clash. Roger, Whitebeard, Kaido, Luffy, Shankso. So then when Luffy begins to learn hardening, he learns the first stage. And then he comes across Katakuri and he finds out that there's a second stage. And then he goes to Wano Country and he finds out that there's a third stage to Armament Haki. Potentially even a fourth. Either way, when it comes to Conqueror's Haki, I would view the first aspect, the ability to sense someone's presence in a battle. Just like how the guys in Skypiea were using Observation Haki, I consider that to be the first stage So there's an element of precognition, but it's not on the level of Katakuri where you can actually see the future. You can see exactly what this person is going to do, where they're going to move, and act accordingly. What Luffy's doing in Fishman Island, going on to Dressrosa, I would consider that to be the first to second stage, because in Fishman Island, Luffy uses his Conquerors Haki to knock out 50,000 fishmen. He does this whilst leaving his crew and his other allies unscathed. So you have to consider that in order to use Conquerors Haki, first of all, to be able to knock out specific individuals on a battlefield and leave your allies, you would need some degree of mastery of observation haki to be able to sense the presence of the ones that you want to intimidate. So potentially, in order to use Conquerors Haki to its fullest potential, you need to first obtain some degree of mastery in the first two, in observation and armament. I mean, we don't know yet if Conquerors Haki itself is a standalone situation where, you know, Roger's sword was coated solely in Conquerors Haki, or if it's a situation where his sword is coated in armament haki. However, that armament haki has been bolstered by Conquerors Haki to become a higher degree of armament. If that is the case, then potentially you could argue that the same situation could apply to observation haki, where you can use Conquerors Haki to increase the effectiveness of your observation and perhaps be able to perceive a greater distance of your surroundings, or even maybe see more clarity with future sight, see further into future sight. At the end of the fight between Luffy and Katakuri, when Luffy tells Kat he's aiming to become the Pirate King, Katakuri says, "You're seeing further into the future than I am," before he falls. If it is the case that Conqueror's Haki is used to bolster the other two Hakis, then, you know, someone being able to see further into the future than Katakuri may actually be a thing, a possibility. If there was to be someone like that, I would put my money on Madame Charlie, because I believe her prophecy of Luffy destroying the Red Line is going to come true, especially now that he has the ability to turn into a giant that can rubberify his surroundings. The Red Line is not going to be gluten-free. Gomu Gomu no Gigant, and then Gomu Gomu no Elephant Gatlin. Gomu Gomu no Rubberifying Elephant Gatlin. If Luffy does Gear Third in giant form, what do you call that punch? Anyway, the reason why I talk about the levels of Haki is so that we can speculate on the levels of Conqueror's Haki, because we can see the progression of each different form. In that observation, it begins with sensing the presence of individuals and being able to visualize their attacks coming in a precognitive way, which then evolves into pure future sight, where you can see what is going to take place a few seconds into the future. I'm going to go out on a limb and put that the extended precognition as the highest level of observation haki, where an individual like Madame Charlie can see many years in advance. And then we go to armament haki, where it begins with simple haki coating. We then look at block mochi from Katakuri to see the second stage of armament haki, which would be block mochi, where I guess Katakuri has imbued a higher degree or a denser degree of haki onto his fist, which he's also used his devil fruit to turn it into a heavier and stronger object, maybe. But this second stage that Katakuri does with block mochi, in some sense, I would put Gear 4th in that same realm, purely because it's Gear 4th is the application of armament haki infused with devil fruit ability. So it's the two becoming one to create a stronger technique, and I think that's what's happening with block mochi. That's what creates the second stage. The third stage of armament haki is the technique that Rayleigh demonstrated on the first day of Ruskaina when he blocked the elephant, where you're able to create an invisible armor around yourself to block techniques. The three admirals used this same technique during Marineford. Whitebeard threw a shockwave, and all three admirals held up their hands in order to negate the damage from this attack. And that's exactly what it did. They were unscathed completely because they were using the highest degree of armament haki, which is invisible armor, which is what Luffy began using on Roof Piece. And we all know that's changed now significantly. Because what we find out in Wano Country, the stage beyond invisible armor, which is being able to push your haki into an object and destroy it from within. This is the same technique that Rayleigh used to free Kami all the way back in Shabondi Archipelago. And you know, since that happened, I wondered if anyone from the Straw Hat crew would use that technique, whether it be Luffy or even Zoro, since he's right hand and it's a right hand feat. But I'm glad that Luffy was the one to actually use it, because it kind of adds to his whole persona as, you know, the warrior of liberation, Joy Boy, the one who is going to free everyone. Everywhere that Luffy goes, he frees all of those who are in bondage, the warrior of liberation. So now that we've talked about the higher levels of observation and armament haki, I want to consider the highest levels of Conquerors Haki. To begin with, I'm going to place that initial feat of being able to intimidate and render your foes unconscious as the first level to Conquerors Haki. The second level, I think, is being able to affect your surroundings. Because if we think back to Luffy first arriving back at Shabondi after the time skip, and then, you know, going on the adventures to Fishman Island and Dressrosa, etc. In those instances, in those places, his Conquerors Haki didn't affect the environment as much as it did in Whole Cake Island. The clash between Luffy and Katakuri not only knocks out the onlookers, it destroys parts of the floor, walls and ceilings in the mirror world. Massive destruction. And then we go back to Shanks, who, to be honest, this is one of the greatest Conquerors Haki feats that have been displayed in the show, in that everyone else, when they use Conquerors Haki to knock out a bunch of people, it's just one burst, boom, and everyone's out. But with Shanks, as he was walking onto the ship and approaching Whitebeard, slow walking across the ship, his Conqueror's Haki is almost like its own presence. Shanks is walking and his Conqueror's Haki is walking alongside him, or behind him, or around him, wherever it is, it's there. And it's not like one burst and everyone who can't take it gets knocked out. Nah, as he approaches Whitebeard, the closer he gets to people who can't take Conqueror's Haki, fall unconscious. No one else in the story has displayed Haki to such a degree where it's just ever present and you can't even stand in front of him if your Haki isn't up to par. In my eyes, I would say that's the highest level of second stage Conquerors Haki that I can think of. So now, when it comes to the third stage of Conquerors Haki, that I would consider that to be Conquerors Haki Infusion. And that is basically the meat and potatoes of the battle that's taking place on the rooftop between Monkey D. Luffy, aka Joy Boy, aka White Yardie, and Kaido. The real fight began when Luffy started throwing Conqueror's punches. And we know after Luffy's real Haki training, he gained control over the ability to push your Haki into objects to destroy it from within. During Roof Piece, when he was hitting Kaido with those techniques, they were hurting Kaido from within. And in fact, it seems to be that only Conqueror's Haki infused techniques can put real damage onto Kaido. The high level armament worked previously a little bit. Kaido felt it enough to dodge, but damage, real damage, significant damage is dealt with Conqueror's Haki Infusion. It worked that way with both Luffy and Zoro with the Dead Man's Game. It seems to be though that Zoro's Conqueror's Haki is nowhere near as strong as Luffy's. Hence why he couldn't push Kaido back. And talking about Zoro, Zoro did something during the King fight that we haven't seen anyone do this in the story. He used Conqueror's Haki to push King when he tried to take his swords for the second time. Now, while I would put that technique in the realm of second stage Conqueror's Haki, it's very interesting to see different applications of it coming from different people and how they consider using it. But now I want to talk about the highest degree of Conquerors Haki, in my mind, that I think we're going to see going forward in the story. I hope we're going to see. It's just a little theory of mine, but Goldie Roger was given 1 year to live by Crocus after he contracted an incurable disease. That 1 year to live was before the Roger pirates went to Skypiea, which was very far before the end of their journey. As far as I can surmise from the information, Oden traveled with Roger for around 5 years, give or take a year. Now, of course, Crocus was on board and helping to keep Roger alive, but this is where I come to the Conquerors Haki aspect of his survival at that point. Because in my mind, I see the Roger pirates, Goldie Roger and Silver's Rayleigh, as Haki masters. It was likely both of them who taught Shanks, but Gold Roger was on a whole other level. And I think what he did near the end of his life is he used Conquerors Haki in order to stave off the hand of death. It was a long time, it was years, but I'm gonna go back to the way how Shanks uses Conquerors Haki. His Conquerors Haki, one of the only people who we've seen whose Conquerors Haki is ever present, and it's just there. It's not just one burst, it's there. Now I imagine that he must have witnessed this kind of Haki mastery from the strongest on the crew, Roger and Rayleigh. The other example I want to use to bolster this theory is Oden boiling in the pot. Oden stood in a pot of boiling oil for 1 hour. He withstood the boiling oil for 1 hour in order to save his comrades. This is the aspect of the highest degree of Conquerors Haki that I wanted to discuss. There's certain individuals in the story who, let's use Luffy for the example, who will push themselves to the absolute limit to accomplish whatever task it is they need to accomplish. In that moment when Oden was boiling in the pot of oil, the thing that he needed to accomplish was rescuing his comrades. And so in my eyes, I think he used Conquerors Haki infusion, or just Conquerors Haki in itself, to hold back the hand of death while he was in the pot, so that he could accomplish the task at hand. This is the same thing I say for Goldie Roger. In order to achieve his dream and circumnavigate the globe and reach every single island and reach Laugh Tale, he had to use Conquerors Haki in order to hold back the hand of death. Now, it could be argued that instead of going to get executed, why didn't he just stop using Haki and let himself die? Well, every single move by Gold Roger was calculated, and he seemed to be attempting to fulfill some kind of prophecy that maybe he found out about, either a prophecy or, you know, a possibility. But the act of returning to Logtown to be executed in front of all of those people, that was to accomplish a specific goal, which is to spur the curiosity of potential pirates in the new world and create a path for the new Joy Boy to follow. I mean, maybe. We don't know how much Oden and Roger knew at the end. Apparently they knew everything. So Oden's diary contains information about this point in the story 20 years in the future from when it was written. So we don't know exactly how much they learned at Laugh Tale. But staying on topic, those two examples, Oden more so than Roger, but I also want to put Portagas de Rouge in there as well. Now, we know nothing about Portagas de Rouge other than that she gave birth to Portagas de Ace. In order to give birth to Portagas de Ace, she carried him in her womb for 20 months in order to hide the child from the world government, who had sent Marines to search for Goldie Roger's child, who was said to have been born on the island that she resided. In order to keep Ace alive, I think Portagas de Rouge used the highest form of Conquerors Haki in order to slow his growth enough that she wasn't noticed while the Marines were there. And then after the year, when they finally left, she was able to give birth. And she died soon after. And to be honest, I think she died because she was doing what she was doing. She was using Conquerors Haki to hold back the hand of death, not just for herself, but for Ace. to keep him inside the stomach so that he would survive. Again, it may be a reach, but it feels good. So the final thing I want to mention when it comes to the highest level of Conquerors Haki is Luffy is going to use this ability at some point, or achieve this ability, I think, because the nature of Gear 5, when we look at the nature of Gear 5, it uses so much stamina. It uses so much stamina that it literally ages Luffy when he releases the form. Eerily similar to what happens to Chopper when he comes out of the new Rumble. He turns into an old geezer. So we can say, it's safe to say that that is potentially an aspect of Zoan Devil Fruits. When you push them far enough, they're gonna push back, or they're gonna take something back as an equivalent exchange for the type of power that you just used. Life Force. So what I'm saying is, at some point Luffy is going to have to fight a battle using Gear 5 to the ultimate degree, potentially against Blackbeard. During that fight, he's going to be pushed beyond his limits, and I think in order to actually win, he's going to have to use the highest degree of Conquerors Haki to stave off the hand of death and hold the Gear 5th form until he's accomplished his task, which is defeating Blackbeard or Emu, whoever is the big bad at the end. I personally think Blackbeard is the final villain. Emu and, you know, the world government, that's gonna be the war that starts it all off. But then everyone's gonna realize that, you know what, Blackbeard is the biggest problem out here. We need to stop this guy. And honestly, I've had in my mind for the longest time, just because of the way the Blackbeard pirates move, I've had it in my mind that they're going to possibly follow the Straw Hat Pirates to Laugh Tale. And that's where the final battle is going to take place between the Straw Hat Pirates and the Blackbeard Pirates on Laugh Tale. To the victor the spoils. But without falling off topic too far, I guess Conquerors Haki. I think the highest degree of Conquerors Haki is the ability to hold back the hand of death until you have accomplished your task. Let me know if you agree, disagree. If you have any points to help my argument, I would appreciate those. If you have any points to counter my argument, I'll read them. But until the next video, thanks for watching, and remember, a sword slash to the back is a true shame to a swordsman.